Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Kansas City-based jazz saxophonist Stephen Martin. On July 27, 2018, he is set to release his debut 2018 CD called Vision on his independent label, SubtleStreet Records. He was born in Champaign, Illinois, and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and he started playing saxophone at the age of 10. He would come to Kansas City via the University of Missouri, KC, to learn under jazz legend Bobby Watson and world-renowned classical saxophonist Tim Timmons. That led him to his home of Kansas City these days, where he has regular performances, and he's contributing to a very thriving scene here in Kansas City, along with America at large. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, hey, Stephen, man, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So let's dive right into your debut album that's coming out on July 27th called Vision. It's a great album and great debut. I just want to know from you, how exciting is it to finally get this out and to see it come to fruition?
It's great. It's really a dream of sorts. I mean, this is something I've always wanted to do. You know, I don't know, when you're younger and you kind of have these dreams, you don't necessarily, you work towards it and, you put all the work in and then you just hope that, one day you can make it happen. And, I was lucky to have a great band, and we got to play together for quite a long stretch, which is also pretty rare nowadays, I would say, especially in jazz, So yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, it's definitely a dream. This is what I've wanted to do.
So the beginnings of that dream happened in Champaign, Illinois, and you were raised in St. Louis and started playing the sax at 10. Talk to me about your childhood and how you got into music.
Sure, yeah. I've been asked the question a lot about, why did you choose a saxophone? And I still think about that, today. I don't know why necessarily. I just, around that age, I was just really fixated on that instrument for some reason, and I just knew I wanted to play saxophone. I remember being about that age in St. Louis, and there's actually so many kids in my class that wanted to play saxophone that my teacher basically said, well, we really need you to play trombone, because we don't have anybody that's going to play trombone. And I do distinctly remember, being really upset about that. I was like, no, I really want to play saxophone, and so they let me, which was awesome. And then I would say the first day we went to the whatever music store, I think it's called Band Instrument Service, something like that in St. Louis. We got the instrument and brought it home, and I think I was honking away on it the first day, and just kind of went from there. I had no idea, obviously, at that point in my life that it would, turn into what it has. But that was a great discovery. It's definitely become, to me, it's not even an instrument that I'm, whatever. It's a part of my body or something like that, which is maybe weird or something, but that's just, that's what it's become. So.
No, that's cool, man. It's an extension of you for sure. So how instrumental was your time at UMKC with Bobby Watson and Tim Timmons? It seems like that was probably a pretty big growth period for you.
Oh, absolutely. To be honest, when I was looking at schools and just trying to figure out, okay, where do I want to, get some formal music training, I really didn't know that much about UMKC. I really found out about it because a lot of my peers that I had met, my last couple of years in high school was in the Missouri All-State Jazz Band, which, by my estimations, at least at the time, was really one of the great all-state bands in the country. I mean, it was, especially for saxophone, it was just very, it was just really great. Really hard to get into the band. I mean, it was something that I knew that in other states, some friends that I had connected with or whatever, they were in it all 4 years or something like that. And I was an alternate or something my junior year. And then then finally made the band, senior year. So it was just very competitive and all that, which is cool. That's great. That's the way you want it to be. And anyway, a lot of my friends that were in that band and that I met that way, they were all, when I asked them, like, where are you going? Well, pretty much all of them said UMKC. And so I was like, oh, okay, I need to check this out, obviously. And I was sold really from the minute I got there. I mean, meeting Bobby, really just getting a sense for what was already starting to happen with the Kansas City music scene, just going out and going to as many places as I could, you know, being like 18 or whatever. But I could just tell that this was a great place to be, and it was, you know, probably the, you know, by far the best decision I could have made. And then I just got even luckier, I think, with working with Tim Timmons, because he's a really gifted classical saxophonist, and doesn't teach there anymore, has since retired, but he's really taught me, you know, so much as well. So yeah, as you said, he and Bobby were incredibly instrumental in helping me. I do remember, funny, the story I always like tell people about Tim Timmons too is, like, you know, he could be kind of prickly, especially with jazz musicians, because they, you know, sometimes we're, you know, accused, you know, of not being able to do certain things, you know, like simple things like play scales or something, and by classical musicians, you know, or whatever. And I remember that we eventually grew to be, like, you know, close friends and things. But I remember one of the first times I met him, I walked in and, like, he said, like, you know, play your D flat major scale, and I played it, but I messed it up, you know, like pretty badly or whatever. And I you know, to me, this was a motivating moment. I suppose to other people, they could have really been hurtful or something, but he was just like, man, how did you get into the conservatory, man? Like, you have to be able to, you know, you have to be able to play your major scales, man. You know, and I just looked at him like, you know what, you're right. You know, like, why can't I do all this stuff? I don't know. And so that, you know, for me, that was just great, because it was I had these two really great perspectives, you know, because sometimes, I don't know, I mean, not that like a jazz musician or like Bobby is going to be okay with me not knowing that or something, but I guess it's just to point out, you know, the different perspectives and just the different things that people value, you know, and being able to go to two great people, you know, just back to back like that was really, really cool. So.
Well, so you make your way to Kansas City to get educated. You stay here. You're a fixture on the scene. So I want to ask you, how satisfied are you with being a part of this Kansas City jazz scene?
Oh, man, it's so great, man. I mean, this is, it's, you know, it's such a vibrant scene right now, you know, and having been in a lot of other cities in this country, I mean, you know, it's not a stretch to say that, you know, especially inside the coast, I mean, I don't know that you're going to find a better jazz scene, and really, to me, this is just the, you know, just because of its size, maybe a step behind New York or something, just simply because of the size, but I don't know that there's any other scene that truly compares, you know, just with the level of musicianship that's here. You know, the vibe that's here is great. You know, it's a community. I mean, that's something that I will say that, you know, like a lot of friends that I have in New York that have come here to stay and, you know, play for like a week or something like that and just hang out. You know, I know that's something that really means something to people, man. You know, like there's you know, not that people, I mean, of course people are doing great things in New York, but, you know, there is kind of a darker vibe there to some degree, you know, like just, I think it's just the, you know, just the speed of life there maybe kind of bogs people down a little bit or something like that. So they, you know, that's something that I, you know, especially musicians from there and other big scenes like that, LA or whatever, that have come here have really mentioned just like how, you know, how the vibrancy of the scene and how, you know, how positive it is, how the community is. And that really, you know, does great things for the music. And then in turn, obviously does even greater things for the audience that's listening to that music. But yeah, man, as far as my, you know, experience coming up, you know, I've met so many, you know, wonderful musicians in this city that, you know, are really world class, man. And it's not a stretch to say that either, because they're all going all over the world. You know, it's like we have people that are, you know, living here but traveling around the world, or people that have lived here who have since moved to, you know, Paris or whatever, you know. And so, yeah, it's a great time to be here. I mean, in my opinion, it's a musical renaissance of sorts. You know, talking to great bass player Bob Bowman, who's, you know, one of the, you know, great masters that I've had. You know, I've been lucky to be around and soak in things from. He has mentioned how that even in his estimation that this is basically, there's like kind of two trajectories or whatever. There's like, you know, he said that there's never been this level of, you know, talent or musicianship along with the same level of infrastructure, like as far as like places to play and all of that. And he said it's usually been one or the other is in a great discrepancy of the other, you know, like there's a lot of people, but maybe not a lot of venues or whatever, or, you know, a lot of venues, but not as many musicians or something. So he said this is at least, you know, in his, you know, decades of being affiliated with Kansas City, that he's even told me that this is, you know, the most vibrant time that he can remember, you know, likely going back to, you know, the time that Charlie Parker was here. So, which I think is great, and I think people know that, man. You know, they go out and they're so appreciative of the music, and it does great things for the community here, you know. And so it's a beautiful thing to be a part of it. I don't take it for granted. I just know it's not like that in most places around the world. So I really try to, you know, at times just sit back and really, you know, really appreciate that even more, you know, because sometimes life, you're like running around doing all this stuff, and then you have to kind of take a step back and, you know, realize how great it is, what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great assessment. It's great news, man, for sure. Let me ask you a very simple question. Why do you love jazz?
Oh, man. Well, you know, man, I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I grew up listening to, you know, what my parents were listening to, you know, and they graduated high school in the 80s, you know, so they were listening to a lot of stuff like that. And, you know, and so, you know, like Michael Jackson, you know, Prince, all the, you know, Stevie Wonder. And I loved all that stuff, and I still do, and got into, you know, this is like before I ever really was introduced to jazz. I was listening to that, and like eventually got into like Led Zeppelin, Nirvana, stuff like that. And then I had a teacher in high school, like a private saxophone teacher, who showed me some recordings of, you know, jazz saxophone players, primarily John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins. And it just floored me beyond what I can even really say, man. I mean, I was so, I was just so floored by what they were doing, and very quickly realized how much of their emotions that they were expressing through the music, you know, and that it was just more potent in that regard than any music that I listened to, which is not like some kind of like slight on any of those other, you know, musicians or artists that I just said. I just meant, just for me anyway, I was just really fixated on that and wanted to learn about that, how they were doing it, you know, and so that, you know, really I was hooked. You know, I mean, I guess I was probably about 16 or 17 around then, you know, so I guess by comparison, I maybe got introduced to the music a little bit later than some of my peers, but yeah, man, I was just, I just thought it was so beautiful, you know, how, you know, just the music, the, you know, the compositional things that went into it, you know, just, there was just a depth to how they were attaching their emotions to the music that I was just obsessed with, and I still am. I mean, it becomes a lifelong, you know, journey and pursuit. You know, you're just trying to further, you know, get yourself intimate with the music so that you can, you know, really just turn everything off and just, you know, for me, it's like attaching emotions to the music. That's what I love about it, man. I mean, it's for me, it's a way to express things that you know, are not that you just can't say with words, I guess, you know. That's so it's hard to, you know, it's hard to hard to talk about it at a certain, there's like a certain threshold, for like how much you can really talk about it, because that's a big reason why I do it, is because it's hard to explain what it, certain areas of it, spiritually or otherwise or emotionally that, I was just, but that's really the reason why. I mean, of course you can get really, like there's, especially those two, saxophone players in particular, I mean, really the greats, of the music, of course they're doing like amazing things on the instrument and you want to learn, okay, well, how are they doing all of this, crazy stuff physically on the instrument? But I could tell with them in particular, that it was more than just that. It wasn't like, whatever, gratuitously flashy playing or, being unconventional just for the sake of that. It was a deeper message that they were trying to get across. And even at a younger, even being a teenager, I could feel that. I don't know how aware of it I really was at the time, or, I think that's kind of a spectrum at all times anyway, but I could feel it, and I just became obsessed, and that's that, like that's still my mentality and my feeling on it today. So.
Right on. Let me ask you this. Everyone has a version of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but who do you think you are?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Man, I think that people that, I think I was just talking about this with some family recently. I think people that know me a little bit, more closely, I think would probably, they know, I think that they get the full whatever, and this probably goes, for a lot of people, but they get kind of the full spectrum of my personality, I think it's just kind of, just an inherent thing in human nature, you just, you maybe don't, give all of that away to everyone that you meet or whatever. So I think people that, don't know me that closely, just in my demeanor and everything, probably think that, I'm like super serious all the time. And like, just because I think, especially when I'm performing, because I'm very, I learned at some point while I was, learning to play the music that I was only really going to be able to do it at the level that I wanted and grow and continue to ascend or whatever, if I was just completely focused, like that, which is something that you hear people say, but it's, it's one thing to be aware that you need to do it, and then it's another thing to really do it, and so I think sometimes that level of focus can really put me in like a stoic state, and I know the music can get pretty like, enraged at times, and so I think people also think like, oh man, was he like, is he like pissed or something or what? I don't know. But, usually I just let the music go where it goes. But yeah, I think that, that probably like, I have a very goofy nature about me, like I really like goofy things, and that's probably the big thing, just as far as like my, basically, like I'm really into like, doing stand-up comedy and stuff like that too, but you wouldn't necessarily know that not knowing me like super closely or anything, because I do kind of have like a more serious vibe when I'm playing, and and that's not necessarily for everybody, I know a lot of musicians have a different approach on that. For me, I take the music very seriously. There's a difference between that and then like taking yourself too seriously, I don't necessarily do that, but I do take the music very seriously, and so I think, that's like a big part of my personality that maybe I don't, just give out all the time is sort of that, funnier, goofier side, but that's how I view myself anyway, I'm a very, I don't know, I think it's, everybody has different nature, but that's kind of me, I think I kind of also like, I kind of, since I've attributed so many of my, like, emotions and everything to the music, I tend to, want to express them more that way than maybe just, with my own, whatever, facial expressions or things like that. So that's kind of, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of my interesting question, being like, very introspective about how other people see you, to some degree, you can't necessarily worry about that so much, but I definitely know that that's what I'm aware of anyway, as far as like, how people likely would see me. But that's how I see myself. And I think that's important. It's a good question too, because I think that's really important for artists and, in general, is you're going to, really tap into, the next level of your art. If that's something that you want to do, then you do really need to know yourself well, because that's such a big thing. I think that was something that for quite a few years while I was learning to play, you gain this skill and everything, and you feel like, okay, I'm starting to get some things together, but really you don't really, start doing, I don't know, it's hard to know how to say this, but basically, in my opinion, you don't necessarily start doing things that people should be hearing until you really start to know yourself and how you can bring your unique, personality and your perspective on the world, universe, whatever, like how, that's really, that's, very important to me, and, something that I could tell that, musicians that I looked up to, that they were able to do that.
Right on. Steven, that's a great way to wrap everything up. Thank you for taking a minute to talk about the new album. Good luck with it, and thanks for what you do for Kansas City.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to get another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in St. Louis, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Steven for his music and his contribution to this Kansas City scene. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at YouTube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.